So Sheila, you want to start with your connection to the pond first of all?
I didn't know anything about plants and animals from Hawaii, but I happened to see a little blurb in the paper that Herb had put in that a community group was trying to restore the pond and get rid of some of the invasive mangrove, and the community members were invited to come down and pull mangrove. And don't ask me why, but we went. Me and I think 3 or 4 students on a Saturday morning, have no idea what to expect, but we got there and pulled mangrove for a few hours, and I think we were all transformed by that experience. The kids went back to school and shared how much fun they had and how exciting it was and how gross and muddy it was and all those fun things. And what evolved was, this is a way to reach alienated students and empower them in their own community, basically in their own backyards, to do some good in the world. And oh, by the way, maybe learn some science too. So we wrote a grant and started going down on a regular basis. We had lots and lots and lots of help. And Herb somehow understood that this was going to lead to bigger and better things. And Leah, you supported it, even though I didn't know that at the time. A lot of things just fell into place. But the bottom line was, having this project, this authentic project in their own community, help these students to vastly exceed, I think, their own expectations of their own education. And we saw them just come alive as learners. It was a great experience for me as a teacher and inspired me to get involved more deeply as a volunteer with the Fish Pond Society at the time.
So Leah, it was, as I recall it, as a result of the experience with Sheila, we engaged on trying to figure out how we could reach more kids with this experience. And we started writing grants for a number of years and finally got something in 2000 from the U.S. Department of Education under the Native Hawaiian Education Act, and which gave birth to ʻŌlelo Loko, which was a very now first curriculum. And I remember one of our duties was to not only develop curriculum for, I think it was grades 4 to 12, but also to train teachers. I recall that I asked you, for support and what you thought about this. Please go ahead and give me what you recall in terms of our first connections and things like that.
Well, I do recall that first connection with you, Herb, and I never actually wanted the connection to end because you became such a critical part of the castle redesign. And what I really wanted to do is have the fish pond be very much a part of the castle redesign. And going through the redesign process, you were very much involved in that. This was design thinking. I think we were the first DOE entity to ever use it. I was the complex area superintendent at the time, and I heard about what Sheila had done, and I was very impressed. I was also very impressed with everything you ever tried to do, which is why I signed off on quite a number of grants to involve students in the fish pond. And my goal was much the same as Sheila's. I wanted an academy that dealt specifically with the fish pond so that students would have the opportunity to connect to themselves through their culture, through their work, and to build confidence and poise as good human beings. And the pond, to me, connects young people to who they are culturally and through confidence and knowledge. And I loved that. So that emerged from the Castle redesign. It was a gift to the young people of Castle High School, Kaneohe, and also to the fish pond.
It was definitely a reciprocal relationship. And, when I first agreed to take on the kuleana of trying to restore the pond, I had no idea of the connection it would make to education. I was only thinking about the physical restoration of the pond. And everything that I've been taught, through my kumu at that point in time was that these Hawaiian places had something to offer the community, which unfortunately had been really neglected for a long time. But I had no idea, the power of it becoming a place for learning until, our paths started to intersect. And I realized, and seeing those kids, Sheila, seeing those very first kids just transform right in front of our eyes, it was just amazing to me. And, I grew up in the community and I never had any experience like this, and remember in those days, we call it culture-based education. And, there was still a predominant attitude where there's no such thing as culture-based education because that's really dumbing down, a sort of standards-driven education approach. And once you begin to intersect culture in it, then, maybe that's not the way to go. And so from what we saw, we were intent on, showing people that it could be very rigorous and that the cultural help to make that social emotional, what we call social emotional connection now, right? For kids, and then after Kahea Loko, we went to, Aloha Aina, which now brought in not just the fish pond, but the entire Ahupua'a of Kaneohe. So I just wanted to let you guys know that, the fruits and of your labor and your support, those, 20 something years ago are still, producing fruit.
I'm thrilled. When you think about it, it was all about, as you said, physical restoration, which was mostly getting rid of mangrove. And somehow that was magical. And the kids and the adults, I'm one of them, just said, if we can clear this area, we will have accomplished something wonderful. But it became so much more than that with the history and science and language arts and math standards incorporated in. It was wonderful.
I think it's hands-on learning, even in science and history, is critical to thinking. And I think these young people got to think about themselves and who they were and what they were learning. And I would venture to guess, I'm not guessing, I would say that what experiences they have had at the fish pond have stayed with them all their lives.
It was a magic moment when I remember maybe after the 15th year or so that we had a teacher come to the pond that said, "Uncle, I came as a fifth grade student, and now she was a teacher bringing her students to the pond." And I practically fell on my knees. I couldn't believe that we had gone through like almost one generation of kids, and they were still interested in bringing theirs, to the pond. Are there other stories that come to mind? Leah, you talked about, that redesign process. And then I think you posed a question, what do we redesign to?
Yeah.
Do you want to share any other thoughts about that time or?
Well, I think it was largely a leap into the unknown, Herb, because we were the first to ever try it as a school. And the only thing that I was sure of in the whole process was that I wanted the students at Castle High School to be involved in the fish pond. I did not know what would come of that. It was being really honest about the progress of the school, which at the time was not where we wanted it to be. And it was about making everything better for students. Putting students in the center of all of the decision making. And I think that there was community-wide participation in that process. The problem was, at the end of it, was taking a concept and putting it into practice is sometimes difficult. So really the only thing that really came out of it was, at the time, was the fish pond and making that a central part, like an academy at Castle High School, where students could join that particular academy and they would focus on history, language arts, mathematics, and science related to the fish pond. And they loved it. The Renaissance of Hawaiian culture and history is alive and well. And if you were to ask me what I would say for the future, Hawaii is not independent in terms of food services. We don't grow enough of our own food. And you're
Right.
growing food right in the fish pond. And we may not have a future if we do not become food independent. That's one thing. The other thing that's really important to me, and I learned a lot of this from you, from the Pacific American Foundation, is that we need to listen to Hawaiian ways in terms of preserving the environment, preserving the culture, and preserving the fish ponds.
Where we've become too dependent on ships bringing us food and energy. And, you know, your inspiration definitely has, you know, been a factor in us setting a new course for the next 25 years towards food sustainability.
I just think that we need to listen to Hawaiian ways. You know, our politicians need to listen. Our educators are already very, very much involved.
Well, hopefully, you know, being able to tell this story, you know, without, with the only motive is for us to be better as a community, to help our communities to feed each other. You know, I mean, I think that's a good message that hopefully can ignite other people to take action, you know. So Sheila, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm going back to the early years again and thinking, had dealt with a lot of skeptical students. Science is evil. Those guys are out to get us. You know, and what we found through the work at the pond was the kids could see it in action, and they understood that their own ancestors were fabulous scientists. And that opened their minds and their eyes and ears to even some of them going into science. And the work goes on, you know, the magic goes on.
Can you share, Sheila, a little bit, you know, when you left Castle High School, you started, you know, at the complex level. I think Leo was still there,
Yes.
training teachers, right, as part with Ellie Tepper.
Right.
And we did that for a number of years, trying to inspire new teachers coming into the district. Can you guys talk a little bit about that? Because I thought that was brilliant. You know, when they first come into the district, they should have this, you know, I think we did it for like a whole year, you know.
So it was a collaboration with Kamehameha schools called Kahua. The program was designed to help teachers, particularly mainland transplants who weren't necessarily familiar with the Hawaiian culture, to be successful with their Hawaiian learners. That was KS's involvement. I mean, that was their motivation. What was especially, I thought, heartwarming was because these were all mostly first-year teachers. Some of them were born and raised in Hawaii, and either they were extremely knowledgeable about their own culture and very happy to see it recognized and were happy to share with us. That was beautiful. But there were also some who were born and raised in the islands and knew nothing about this. And they were probably the most excited of all to discover right there in their own island.
We started this program, Herb, mostly because we did start it. Being a first-year teacher, when the DOE loses 4 out of 5 after 3 years, that did not happen so much in Windward because of teachers like Sheila and Ellie. who just retired, I might add. Ellie did. And it was really about supporting first-year teachers and second-year teachers and third-year teachers so that they would acclimatize to Hawaii, including acclimatize to the culture through Kahua, and stay in Hawaii and teach our young people. There are principals now because of what they have learned, even through Kahua, who now take their beginning teachers themselves on a bus through the community and teach them the history of that particular community.
Wow. Well, I remember, I was invited to go to some of these places that I either have not been to myself or have not been to for a long time, like Waimea Valley, local Ea, Kahana Valley, my goodness. But to not only go visit, but be in the presence of people that were from those places and hear their stories firsthand. For me, growing up in the islands, it was super powerful for me as well. And Leah, I also wanted to ask you, remember Cheryl Kauhane Lupenui had asked us, I think a few years after the redesign happened, to participate in this activity that eventually led to the adoption of Naho Pena'a'o and the HA framework. Can you share a little bit about that? You and I served on that committee, and I'll let you kind of take it from there. You want to share some thoughts about that time?
It was introduced to the DOE through the board, and the superintendent then said, we shall all do this. And whenever that happens, it takes a long time for all of us to do this. And it has after, Sheila knows what I'm talking about. After all these years that I've been gone, which is going on 6 years, I am finally seeing it used in most of the schools that I visit. And I'm thrilled because the values that were finally selected in Naho Pena'a'o are universal. They're Hawaiian, but they are universal. And I see them in the immersion classes, but now I see them on the English language side, and I'm absolutely thrilled. Schools are using them as the basis for their theoretical structure in terms of how they want young people to be and how they want them to turn out as good human beings and good citizens. It's lovely. It was the culminating experience of my work in the DOE, and I am so proud that I got to be part of it, and proud that you were part of it as well.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I am just, I don't think we really fully understood, the depth of how it could help people, because I think we all realized that a lot of people were doing parts of it already. Yes. We just didn't have a sort of connecting framework to put it together in a way that, we understood the collective impact when everybody was doing it, and the power of that. And then, the Office of Hawaiian Education coming on board, and I'm still amazed that, Office of Hawaiian Education is probably 5 years old. I mean, we've been a state since 1959, and, it took that long for us to actually have an Office of Hawaiian Education, that's focused on education, which is great. And, they've been a big catalyst for that, pushing, that ideology, I guess, or that framework. But I guess, now that I look back on it, the point is that, and it's not just about Waikalua, it really is about how we bridge, again, indigenous wisdom and values and methodologies with, mainstream, because we live in both worlds, right? The Western and the Hawaiian world. Why can't we have it all, right? The problems, we still have, global climate change, sea level rise, I just think, the king tides that have affected our walls. I think, Sheila, you saw the impact of that, when the Kaneohe Bay rose and it basically covered our fish pond wall and the mini extinction. Yeah, the mini extinction event with the invasive, lemur all of a sudden, it really spooked us, I guess. We have some major challenges in front of us, and hopefully that these stories for the future will hopefully give people of the future, generations of the future, some kind of understanding about how important, these places are and the connections that we've been able to make, in our professional lives as well to elevate our community, that, we all love Hawaii and how we can continue to do that. Thoughts more about that?
I listened to this talk with, I don't remember her name, but she was the president of the Native American Congress, so to speak, and she's at the climate summit right now. And her whole purpose, one of her whole purposes was to get people to listen to Indigenous history and science, because what she said is that her people, the Crow Indians, predicted everything that's happening now because people did not take care. They did not adopt the Native American ways of dealing with climate and dealing with the environment. And I really believe that we are fortunate in Hawaii because we have the Hawaiian culture, which is going to teach us the same thing. So the integration of cultural knowledge with science, to me, that's the answer to prevent Loko I from never being inundated by the ocean again. And the same with ocean sea rise is really caused by heat, which causes big swells, which takes out people's houses.
Yeah.
So there are people alive like you that have the answers now. We just have to listen. We have to find a way to build that bridge so that people who make decisions for this state make decisions based on that knowledge as well as science, technical science.
Yeah.
I agree with
Sheila, thoughts about that?
I agree with you, Leah. I would say, however, that what I learned through this process was we don't necessarily know the answers, but we know the questions. And that drives us to the next level of understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And it works for teachers, and it works for students, and it works for PhDs in science. That's the whole process. And I mean, the planet's problems are so complex, I don't think anybody knows the answers, or at least all of the answers. But we certainly know what isn't working in our best interests, and have a lot to fall back on in terms of what worked in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So I agree with you that we need to plumb those depths and celebrate that, as much of that knowledge as can be recovered and applied to our modern issues.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is the key.
And I think that our students are brilliant.
Yes.
I'm very hopeful, if anything, because just seeing those fourth graders down at the pond this week, I mean, their level of engagement and questioning, boy, at the end of the day, I was exhausted. But they were good questions, and they were passionate about learning. It takes time for institutional change to occur.
Correct.
And the good news is that, in 2021, as we speak, November 2021, there are 10 times more nonprofit organizations doing similar work than there were 25 years ago. And they're doing amazing things. And many schools have partnered with them. I think we're onto something, and there's a thirst, because there's a lot of careers that can blossom even out of just coming to a fish pond and learning and working. There's lots of careers, and when you start going to multiple places within your communities, now those choices become exponential. Okay, well, any closing thoughts, you guys? This has been a great opportunity to just kind of reminisce a little bit, share, and hopefully be hopefully a continued source for people that will be hearing and watching this in the future to take action, and help us get to where we need to be in terms of greater self-sufficiency, I would think.
I want to tell you what you are at the end of the day, Herb. You are an educator, and I don't give people that title loosely. That's a compliment. You have done so much to educate people for decades.
Thank you. I was never trained as an educator. I never considered myself an educator. And sometimes people ask me, "Well, are you an educator?" I go, "No." But I appreciate that.
Well, I would also like to echo that I think you're a consummate educator.
Right.
And, frankly, sometimes formal training gets in the way. So you followed your heart. And if anything, that's my takeaway from my involvement at Waikalua Loko and with you all.
And I just want to give you my blessings and God's blessings, for being colleagues, friends, and most of all, always doing that in the spirit of aloha. And I really, really, from the bottom of my heart, appreciate and love you guys so much. And you have made a huge difference in my life. So thank you for spending the time to do this today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for all you are and all you do, Herb.